everyone, Susanne here from the Project Manager Clinic. Now I could be a little bit strange when I do projects, that's for sure. I don't often do them the same way as everybody else. But when I do my governance plan, I do it myself. And I found that over the years, more and more of that is left to change managers. But we don't always have the luxury of having a change manager in our project or on our project. And very often, if you're starting your project from scratch, as I've often done, and you're planning it, there's no business case or anything like that, you often don't have any other resources. So you don't have a change manager. You are often completely alone on the project, building the team, working out who you're going to have on the team, what the decision-making process looks like. Of course, you'll have your key stakeholders and your sponsor, but you won't have, in a lot of cases, access to a change manager or somebody like that. Good news, as project managers, we have those tools in our toolbox. Now, maybe they're not quite as advanced as a change manager and ProSci and things like that, that they can rely on. But as a project manager, we still do have stakeholder management, communications management, and governance. And today I wanted to talk to you a bit about governance, because one of the key reasons that projects go bad is because governance is not in place. And by that I mean, who is going to make the decisions? When do they make the decisions? How do they make the decisions? And how are those decisions approved and carried out? We've talked before in the Project Manager Clinic about stakeholder silence, where they're absent, or the sponsor particularly is absent from the decision-making process in the project. So as a program director or a program manager or a senior project manager, it's up to you to set that governance up early in your project. Now, I generally do this as I'm working out the scope of the project and what I have to deliver. And that gives me some information about what sort of resources that I will need on the project. Now, I put all of this into what we used to call a project management plan. And a lot of people think that's just the Gantt chart. Well, it's actually not. I call it a project or program strategy. And that's how I'm going to approach the delivery of the program or the project, what the structure of it looks like, how many people I'm going to have on that program, and in my case, how many projects am I going to have in my portfolio of programs. So if I do not set up that governance structure very early in my program, it just won't work at all, and there will be chaos. Once I've found out or worked out what sort of resources I need on my program, I will certainly try and get a change manager or an org change manager, depending on what the program is. And I'll also, if it's an IT program, I will get my architect or my solution architect or my senior lead technical person. And then I start building what are the skills that I need. Now, these are all aspects of governance because it's the org chart I'm developing of my project. And I have to be very aware of how my project fits into the organisation that I'm working in. So that means the governance structure has to follow some of the rules in that organisation. For example, I can't just go to a teammate or someone on my team for a decision about something that should be done by the senior stakeholder or the sponsor. And those people, not always, but very often are senior people in that organisation. Or they could be somebody that's a business owner or a product owner, but they already have fit into a structure in that organisation. So my governance structure and my org chart of my project aligns to that structure. Of course, when we've got vendors that we are procuring or suppliers that are working on the project, it's vitally, vitally important that you get that governance structure and that decision-making process and the agreement to the decision-making process absolutely done up front and communicated very clearly to any supplier or any organisation that you have procured to assist you in delivering the project. Now, this is very often overlooked, and again, it's part of the project or program manager's brief to make sure that you have that governance structure in place, because when things go bad, they can go really bad. And if they're going to go bad with an external organisation or some other client or external stakeholder or government department, whoever it is, you then are in flight with your project. So you've now got no time to start mucking about, backtracking, doing something you should have done before. Now, if you're watching this today and you're on the channel, please subscribe, because you'll find that we drill down on these things and discuss these sorts of subjects in a little bit more detail on the webinars with a very esteemed panel that, for me, fortunately, agree to give us their expertise for no cost. So it's really important that if you like what you're seeing, please give us a thumbs up, because you're not just giving us giving a thumbs up for me, you're also appreciating those other people. Now let's just wind back to that governance conversation again. Another part of governance that I think is really important is the comms plan. Yes, it's part of change, absolutely, and you will probably wait in a lot of cases for your change manager to do the comms plan. I usually do the comms plan myself because I've had plenty of practice, and I often don't have time to waste because of the nature of the projects that I do, which is often a remediation, a recovery, or setting up something that's needed really quickly. So we don't have a lot of time. And like I said before, I don't always have the staff, so I have to do it myself. Communications management is part of project management. It never used to be, maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago, but now it is, because organisations like the Project Management Institute, the PMI, and the Australian Institute of Project Managers, AIPM, recognised that this was a really fundamental skill that project managers needed to have. Gone were the days when project managers could just be super technical nerds and not be outwardly facing. Those days have gone. Project managers now are inwardly to their team facing and outwardly facing. So they have to be champions of their own project. That means that you have to put in place those governance agreements around how you're going to communicate, who's going to communicate, in what way you're going to communicate, who will approve the communication. I don't think a lot of project managers ever think about this. And it may be because I've worked in 3 levels of government that I understand that there are some things that I, as the project manager, am not authorised to communicate outwardly, particularly if it's to the whole of the organisation or if it's external to the organisation, which in many cases it is, and you will need to have a comms expert, or you may have a commercial type person in your organisation or comms part of the organisation that you will have to run those things through. So it's very important then that people understand what the governance there is in that decision-making process. Otherwise, it can really go very bad. I was once on a project where, this was quite a long time ago, somebody asked me for a document, and I said, it's in draft, it's in draft, it's in draft. And they were under pressure. They didn't tell me they were under pressure, and they took that document to a program board meeting, and it gained momentum when really it shouldn't have gained momentum. It was just a draft and it wasn't for communication, but it set up expectations in the board that inflated by a long way the expected budget. And that had really serious ramifications for myself as the program manager and also for my sponsor. So I learned from that to make sure that my governance is locked down, that it's really clearly communicated to people. And this is again where the RACI comes in. We've talked about the RACI before, myself and Margaret Dos Santos. Very, very handy tool to have, and we've got videos on the RACI in more detail, and there's more to come. That's how powerful a tool it is. I found it's a very quick way of putting in place some governance if governance is needed urgently, but that still doesn't negate this process I'm talking about. So for me as a program director in business transformation, the governance is usually meant the decision-making process, who's on the team, who's on the board, my org chart in my team, how we're going to interact with other areas of the organisation, certainly the comms, how we will handle issues, how we will handle risks. And yes, all of these things have their own tools and they are their own practices. But if you're doing something that is large or it's a priority project, these governance issues need to be communicated and agreed well up front of everything going like a steam train down the tracks. So if you've got any questions about governance, anything that you'd like to hear more on, we'd love to hear from you here at the Project Manager Clinic. So drop us a line. Details are in the description below, and you can always go to the website. There's a lot more resources there and how else you can contact us. If you're struggling and you need some additional help as a project manager, contact me for some information about my coaching program for project managers. If you're a senior stakeholder and you're finding that you've got difficulties getting what you need out of your project, or the project is maybe gone off on its spinning own little tangent, again, that coaching program can help you. It's only 10 sessions, very quick, gets to the point, and will get you moving back on your way, with one of the outcomes being an action plan or a strategy. So again, have a great project day, subscribe, give us a thumbs up below, and come back and visit us again. Bye for now.